Marcus Thompson stood outside Mount Sinai Hospital, his trembling hands clutching a crumpled discharge form. At 52, he barely recognized his reflection in the sliding glass doors, gaunt cheeks, graying temples, and eyes that had seen too much darkness. This was his third overdose this year, but something felt different this time. Maybe it was the way his teenage daughter Emma had looked at him when she visited, not with the usual disappointment, but with a resignation that cut deeper than any judgment. 20 years of prescription painkiller addiction had stripped away everything he'd once been proud of. His thriving construction business, his marriage to Sarah, and most painfully, his relationship with his children. What had started as legitimate pain management after a workplace accident had spiraled into a demon he couldn't shake, despite countless attempts at rehabilitation. The late autumn wind whipped around him as he watched ambulances come and go, their sirens a familiar soundtrack to his chaos. He had nowhere to go. Sarah had finally changed the locks last month, and his brother Michael, after years of offering shelter and second chances, had reached his limit. His wallet contained nothing but an old photo of his kids and a business card from the hospital's social worker. "Hey brother, you look like you could use some coffee." The voice came from a man in a worn leather jacket, standing near a small cart with "Streetlight Ministry" painted on its side. Marcus had noticed the cart during his previous hospital stays. It appeared every Tuesday and Thursday evening, offering hot drinks and conversation to anyone who needed them. "I'm James," the man said, already pouring coffee into a paper cup. No strings attached, just warmth. Marcus accepted the coffee with shaking hands, the heat seeping through the cup and into his cold fingers. Something in James's eyes held no judgment, just a steady presence that made Marcus's carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "I've got nothing left," Marcus found himself saying, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. 20 years of choices I can't take back." James nodded, pouring himself a cup. "I had 10 years myself, different substance, same prison." He gestured to a nearby bench. "Want to hear about it?" As they sat, Marcus noticed a small group gathering around another cart further down the sidewalk, where someone was offering sandwiches and what sounded like prayer. The scene struck him as surreal. These people choosing to spend their evening outside a hospital, serving strangers with a gentle persistence he couldn't quite understand. "I don't even know where to start," Marcus admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "My daughter Emma, she's 17 now. Yesterday she told me she's graduating early, already got accepted to college in California. She didn't even tell me she was applying." He stared into his coffee. "I'm going to lose them all, aren't I? Maybe I already have." James was quiet for a moment, the hospital's emergency lights casting shifting shadows across his face. "The story isn't over yet, Marcus. Not as long as you're breathing." He pulled out a small card. "We've got a meeting starting in 20 minutes, just around the corner. No pressure, but if you want to take the first step toward writing a different ending." Marcus looked at the card, then back at the hospital doors. He'd walked out of those doors twice before, straight to his dealer's house. But tonight, something tugged at him. Perhaps it was Emma's face, or maybe it was the simple kindness of hot coffee and an invitation without demands. He took a deep breath of the sharp autumn air. 20 minutes, you said." The New Life Community Center basement was nothing like the sterile rehabilitation facilities Marcus had frequented. Instead of institutional fluorescent lights and motivational posters, warm lamplight cast a gentle glow over mismatched furniture and walls covered with local artwork. The smell of coffee and homemade cookies mixed with the lingering scent of incense from the evening prayer service upstairs. James introduced Marcus to Pastor Elena Rodriguez, a former emergency room nurse whose own journey through loss had led her to establish Streetlight Ministry 15 years ago. Her silver-streaked black hair and laugh lines spoke of hard-earned wisdom, while her direct gaze carried both compassion and unflinching honesty. "We do things a little differently here," Elena explained, settling into a worn armchair as the room began to fill. "Yes, we have our 12 steps and therapy referrals, but we believe true healing needs community and something bigger than ourselves." The evening's gathering included an unlikely mix of people. Tony, a retired schoolteacher who'd lost his wife to cancer and found himself dependent on alcohol. Maria, a young corporate lawyer whose cocaine habit had nearly cost her license. And Reverend David Chen, who openly shared his own past struggles with gambling addiction while serving his congregation. What struck Marcus most was the absence of pretense. Here people wore their brokenness, not as a badge of shame but as a testament to their ongoing journey. Between shared stories and prayer requests, they discussed practical matters, job opportunities, affordable housing options, and strategies for rebuilding trust with family members. "Your daughter Emma," Eleanor said after Marcus shared about his hospital encounter. "She's at Hamilton High." When Marcus nodded, she continued, "Maria mentors there every Thursday. Maybe when you're ready, we could start building a bridge." Marcus noticed a young man in the corner quietly refilling coffee cups and arranging chairs. James saw his questioning look and explained, "That's Kyle, Elena's son. Lost 3 years to heroin before finding his way back. Now he's studying to be a counselor." As the meeting drew to a close, Eleanor approached Marcus with a small leather-bound book and a business card. "My personal number," she said, tapping the card. "And this," she held up the book, "is a journal. We found that walking with God means being honest, with Him, with others, and especially with ourselves. Start writing your story, Marcus, all of it. The good, the bad, and everything in between." The evening had shown Marcus a world he didn't know existed, one where broken people held each other up, where faith wasn't a set of rules but a lifeline, and where maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. 3 weeks into his journey with Streetlight Ministry, Marcus faced his first major crisis. The constant pain from his old back injury, usually numbed by pills, became unbearable. Lying on his modest bed in the ministry's transitional housing, every breath felt like fire shooting through his spine. His phone displayed a text from his old dealer. "Here if you need relief, man. One-time offer. First one's free." The walls of his small room seemed to close in. He'd been faithfully attending meetings, even started reading the Bible Elena had given him, marking passages about God's promises of healing and restoration. But in the darkness of 3 a.m., those promises felt distant and hollow. Marcus reached for his journal, hands trembling. The past week's entries stared back at him, hopeful words about reconnecting with Emma, rebuilding trust, finding God. Now his pen scratched out darker truths. "I don't know if I can do this. God, are you even listening? The pain, I can't..." A memory surfaced. Sarah's face the night she'd found his secret stash of pills, tears streaming as she whispered, "I don't know who you are anymore." He'd promised to change then too, and after the first rehab, and the second. The phone buzzed again. "Windows closing, buddy." Marcus stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. In the mirror he saw his father's eyes, the same haunted look he'd worn during his losing battle with alcoholism. "I won't be like you," Marcus had sworn at 19. Yet here he was, 3 decades later, fighting the same demons. He called James, expecting voicemail at this hour. Instead, James answered on the second ring. "I can't sleep," Marcus choked out. "The pain. I've got a way to make it stop." "I'm coming over," James said without hesitation. "But first, look under your sink." Confused, Marcus opened the cabinet. There, tucked behind cleaning supplies, was a small box he hadn't noticed before. Inside lay a letter in Elena's handwriting. "Dear friend, if you're reading this, you're probably facing your first real test. The box also contains pain medication, legal, prescribed, non-addictive. We knew this moment would come. This isn't just about physical pain, is it? It's about trust. Trust in God, in us, in yourself. The choice is yours. But remember, you're not alone in this fight. Elena." Marcus slid down against the bathroom wall, letter in one hand, phone in the other. The dealer's message glowed accusingly. His thumb hovered over the reply button. A knock at his door. James's voice. "I brought reinforcements." Through the door's peephole, Marcus saw James, Elena, and to his shock, Kyle, all still in their pajamas, carrying coffee and determined expressions. The dealer's message blinked one last time before Marcus deleted it. His back still screamed in protest, but as he opened the door to his midnight support team, something else screamed louder. Hope. As Marcus's physical dependency weakened, other challenges emerged. His construction company, now run by his former partner Steve, was struggling. Several clients had backed out of projects after Marcus's last relapse made local news. Steve called one morning, voice heavy with regret, to discuss buying out Marcus's remaining shares at a fraction of their worth. Meanwhile, Emma's graduation approached. Through Maria's mentoring program, Marcus learned that Emma had been selected as valedictorian. The thought of his daughter speaking at graduation while he sat on the sidelines felt like swallowing broken glass. Sarah had started dating someone, a fact Marcus discovered when he overheard Maria and Elena discussing an upcoming church event. The man was a deacon at their old family church, the same one Marcus had stopped attending years ago. His sobriety journal entries became tinged with a new kind of pain. God, I gave up my place in their lives. Now someone else is filling it. The complexity of rebuilding trust became apparent during a chance encounter at the hospital, where Marcus now volunteered with street light ministry. His son Jason, a medical resident, froze upon seeing his father serving coffee to patients' families. "What is this, Dad? Your latest performance?" Jason's words carried years of disappointment. "Remember coaching my little league team? You were sober then too, for a while." Marcus had rehearsed countless apologies, but facing his son's anger, all he could say was, "You're right. I've given you every reason to doubt me. I can't undo that, but I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday if you ever want to talk." Jason walked away without responding, but Marcus noticed him watching from the hospital windows on subsequent evenings. Through it all, Kyle became an unexpected source of wisdom. During their coffee runs for the ministry, he helped Marcus navigate the complex terrain of family healing. "My mum had to learn to let me go before I could come back," Kyle shared. "Sometimes love means accepting that trust has to be rebuilt brick by brick, and sometimes those bricks are moments as small as showing up to serve coffee, week after week." Eleanor added another dimension to Marcus's recovery by involving him in the ministry's outreach to the local men's shelter. "Healing happens faster when we focus on others," she explained. This new responsibility forced Marcus to confront his own judgments and prejudices, especially when he recognized a former employee among the shelter's residents. Each day brought its own test of Marcus's commitment, not just to sobriety, but to becoming the man his family needed him to be, the man God was calling him to become. The turning point came unexpectedly, 6 months into Marcus's recovery, during a routine evening at the men's shelter. He was serving soup when a commotion erupted. A young man had overdosed in the bathroom. As chaos unfolded, Marcus found himself kneeling beside the unconscious figure, performing CPR while waiting for paramedics. In those desperate minutes, something profound shifted inside him. The young man's face, blue-tinged and struggling for life, could have been his own, had been his own 3 times over. But this time Marcus was on the other side of the crisis, his hands steady, his mind clear, his prayers focused and fervent. After the paramedics took over and the young man was stabilized, Marcus retreated to the shelter's small chapel. His hands were shaking, but not from withdrawal, from the raw reality of what he'd witnessed, what he'd been part of. He pulled out his journal, now worn and coffee-stained, and began to write, "Tonight I saw myself through your eyes, God. Not just who I was, but who you're shaping me to be. That young man. I knew exactly what he'd taken, where he'd hidden his stash, even which dealer's signature mix it probably was. All that knowledge from my old life, it helped save him. You're not erasing my past, you're redeeming it." The next morning, Eleanor found Marcus still in the chapel, his journal open to a page filled with a vision that had come to him through the night watches, a rehabilitation program that would combine medical expertise with spiritual mentorship, using recovered addicts as bridges between the clinical and the personal. "I've been waiting for this," Elena said, sitting beside him. "The moment when you'd see what God sees in you. But I've lost everything," Marcus started to say. "Have you?" Elena challenged. "Or have you been stripped down to exactly where God can rebuild?" That afternoon, Marcus received 2 unexpected visitors at Streetlight Ministry, Jason, still in his hospital scrubs, and Emma in her high school letter jacket. They'd heard about the incident at the shelter, Jason from the paramedics, Emma through Maria's youth group. "The paramedics said you knew exactly what to do," Jason said, his professional demeanor softening slightly. "They said you kept him alive." Emma stepped forward, pulling something from her jacket pocket, her graduation speech draft. Would you read it? I want to know what you think." Marcus took the papers with trembling hands, noticing they were spotted with eraser marks and coffee stains, much like his journal. His eyes caught a line halfway down the first page. "Sometimes the greatest acts of courage are the quiet ones, showing up day after day, choosing again and again to be better than our past." As he looked up at his children, Marcus felt the full weight of God's presence in this moment. He wasn't getting his old life back, that life was gone. Instead, something new was emerging from the ashes of his past, something that could only have been built on the foundation of brokenness and redemption. Word of Marcus's intervention at the shelter spread through the recovery community. The young man he'd saved, Michael, became a regular at Streetlight Ministries meetings. But more surprisingly, Michael's father, a prominent local business owner, approached Marcus with an unexpected proposition. "My son told me about your vision," he said during a private meeting at the ministry. "A bridge between medical treatment and spiritual recovery. I've got an empty building on Wilson Street and connections with every healthcare provider in the city. What do you say we put this vision into action?" The offer stunned Marcus, but it wasn't the only change unfolding. Steve called about the construction company, his tone markedly different from their last conversation. "Two of our biggest clients asked about you," Steve said. "They heard what happened at the shelter. They want to know if you'd consider consulting on their projects. Said something about wanting people with real-life experience in community impact construction." Sarah's response came through a handwritten note delivered to Streetlight Ministry. "I saw your name in the hospital newsletter," she wrote. "Jason talks about the changes he's seeing. I don't know where this road leads, but I'm proud of the work you're doing." The most profound transformation, however, was happening in Marcus's daily life. His back pain, while still present, had become manageable through a combination of physical therapy, prayer, and the non-addictive medications Elena had introduced him to. More importantly, he'd learned to see the pain not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a reminder of his dependence on God's strength. Elena observed these changes with quiet satisfaction. "You're not just staying sober," she noted during one of their mentoring sessions. "You're learning to live with purpose." The truth of her words was evident in Marcus's growing involvement with the ministry. He'd started a special support group for fathers in recovery, drawing on his own experience of rebuilding relationships with his children. Every session began with the same reminder: our past mistakes don't disqualify us from being the fathers our children need. They equip us to be more humble, more grateful, more present. Even Kyle noticed the shift. "You've stopped looking over your shoulder," he remarked one evening as they closed up the ministry. "Like you're finally facing forward instead of watching for the past to catch up with you." A year into his recovery, Marcus stood before the city council, presenting plans for the Bridgehaven Recovery Center. The converted Wilson Street building would soon house a revolutionary program combining medical detox facilities with spiritual counseling and life skills training. But the most innovative aspect was its mentorship program, recovering addicts working alongside healthcare professionals. "Addiction doesn't just break the body," Marcus explained to the council. "It breaks trust, relationships, and spirit. Our program rebuilds all three." The journey to this moment hadn't been smooth. Securing medical partnerships had meant confronting skeptics who questioned whether recovering addicts could be trusted in a healthcare setting. Marcus's response was to invite them to Streetlight Ministries meetings, where they witnessed former addicts now serving as pillars of support for others. His own story became a testament to possibility. Every Tuesday, Marcus now led a morning devotional at the hospital where he'd once been a frequent patient. Healthcare workers who had treated him during his overdoses now referred struggling patients to his support group. Emma's graduation marked a particularly powerful milestone. As she delivered her valedictorian speech, Marcus sat between Sarah and Jason, tissue in hand. When Emma spoke about courage and second chances, her eyes found his in the crowd. "Sometimes," she said, "our greatest teachers are those who show us that it's never too late to change." The construction business took an unexpected turn when Steve proposed a new partnership, not in building structures, but in creating recovery-friendly workplaces. Together, they developed a program helping companies hire and support employees in recovery. Their first success story was Michael, the young man from the shelter, who now worked as a project coordinator. Marcus's journal entries reflected this season of growth. "Lord, you didn't just heal my addiction, you're healing my whole life. Today I watched Jason teach a medical training session at Bridgehaven. My son, teaching in a center that grew from our pain. You really do make all things new." The father's support group he'd started grew into a movement, with chapters opening in neighboring cities. Marcus found himself mentoring other fathers through the delicate process of rebuilding trust with their children. "Recovery isn't just about stopping," he often said. "It's about becoming someone new while honoring the lessons of who you were." Eleanor watched this transformation with maternal pride. During their weekly coffee meetings, she helped Marcus navigate the challenges of leadership while maintaining his own spiritual health. "Your story isn't about addiction anymore," she observed. "It's about restoration." The truth of her words was evident in the growing stack of recovery coins on Marcus's desk, not just his own, but those given to him by others he'd helped along the way. Each one represented a story of hope, a life touched by the authenticity of his journey. "I never thought broken pieces could build something so beautiful," he told Eleanor one evening, watching the sunset from the Bridge Haven rooftop garden. She smiled, pointing to the mosaic wall they'd created with tiles painted by program participants. "That's exactly how God works," she replied. "He uses our broken pieces to create masterpieces of grace." As Bridge Haven's first anniversary approached, Marcus faced his greatest challenge yet. The state had selected the center as a potential model for a statewide recovery program, but their evaluation would coincide with a deeply personal milestone, the 15th anniversary of his father's death from alcohol-related liver failure. The timing seemed like more than coincidence. Marcus found himself pulling out old photographs, including one of his father outside their church, taken during his brief period of sobriety. In his journal, Marcus wrote, "Dad, I wish you could see how God has transformed our family's legacy of addiction into a ministry of healing." Preparations for the state evaluation consumed his days. The Bridge Haven team worked tirelessly, compiling success stories, recovery rates, and community impact reports. But Marcus felt God pushing him towards something bigger, a complete revelation of his journey, including the darkest moments he'd never shared publicly. "They need to see all of it," Elena advised during a late-night planning session. "The raw truth has power that polished presentations never will." The pressure intensified when Marcus learned who would lead the evaluation team: Dr. Richardson, the emergency room physician who had treated his last overdose. The doctor who had looked him in the eye and said, "Next time, we might not be able to bring you back." Meanwhile, Sarah suggested something unexpected: a family dinner before the evaluation. "The kids want to be part of this," she said, "and Tom does too." Tom, her new husband, had been surprisingly supportive of Bridge Haven's ministry, even offering his services as a financial advisor. Jason added another layer to the approaching days by asking to present Bridge Haven's medical program himself. "I want them to see what happens when medical science and faith work together," he explained. "When family history becomes family healing." Emma, home from her first year of college, spent evenings helping Marcus prepare his testimony. "Remember what you taught me about honesty, Dad," she said, red pen poised over his draft. "Let's make sure they see both the scars and the healing." As the evaluation date drew near, Marcus retreated to the rooftop garden one evening. Looking out over the city, he could see the hospital where his journey had begun, the shelter where God had shifted his perspective, and the community that had become his support system. Tomorrow would require complete surrender, not just of his story, but of his pride, his fear, and his need for control. The evaluation day dawned with unexpected news. A young man had overdosed at the train station, just blocks from Bridge Haven. Dr. Richardson, already en route for the evaluation, was diverted to the emergency scene. Without hesitation, Marcus and Jason grabbed the center's emergency response kit and rushed to help. They found chaos at the station. The young man lay unconscious on the platform, his mother wailing beside him. As Dr. Richardson worked to stabilize him, Marcus knelt beside the distraught mother, immediately recognizing her: Andrea, his former dealer's wife. "Joey's been trying to get clean," she sobbed. "He wanted to be like you, Marcus. He kept saying his dad could change too, just like you did." In that moment, everything converged. Dr. Richardson calling out medical orders, Jason administering emergency care, and Marcus steady, present, praying, holding space for a family facing their own rock bottom. The state evaluation team, having followed Dr. Richardson, witnessed it all. When they finally gathered at Bridge Haven hours later, Marcus stood before them, his prepared speech forgotten. Instead, he pulled out his journal. 15 years ago today, I lost my father to addiction," he began, his voice raw with emotion. 2 years ago, I lay in an ER bed while Dr. Richardson here fought to save my life. Today, my son and I helped save Joey, the son of the man who used to sell me the very drugs that nearly destroyed me." The room fell silent as Marcus continued. "This is what Bridge Haven is about. It's not just a recovery center. It's a place where God transforms generational curses into generational blessings, where medical expertise meets spiritual healing, where broken families find hope. Jason stepped forward, adding his perspective as both a doctor and a son. Emma shared how the center had helped her understand and forgive. Even Tom, Sarah's husband, spoke about witnessing the restoration of his stepchildren's relationship with their father. The moment that moved everyone to tears came when Andrea and Joey were brought in from the hospital. Joey, still weak but conscious, looked at Marcus and said, "I'm ready for help. And my dad is too. He's waiting outside." Dr. Richardson turned to the evaluation team. "I've been practicing emergency medicine for 30 years. What I witnessed today wasn't just crisis intervention. It was divine intervention. This program works because it treats the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. And it works because the people running it have walked through the fire themselves." Eleanor, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward with the recovery journal Marcus had started 2 years ago. "This story," she said, opening to the first page, "began with a man who thought he had nothing left to give. Today, that same man showed us what happens when we surrender our brokenness to God." The state officials exchanged glances, but before they could speak, Marcus raised his hand. "Whatever your decision," he said, "nothing changes for us. We'll be here tomorrow and the next day and the next because that's what God called us to do. Every life matters. Every story can be redeemed." 6 months after the evaluation, Bridgehaven's model was implemented in 3 other cities across the state. But for Marcus, the true measure of success wasn't in the expansion. It was in the daily miracles he witnessed. Joey and his father both completed the program, their shared recovery journey healing wounds that went back generations. They started a support group specifically for families recovering together, meeting in the same rooftop garden where Marcus had once questioned his own path forward. The construction company, under Steve and Marcus's guidance, became a leading voice in recovery-friendly workplace initiatives. Their program for hiring recovering addicts was featured in national business magazines, changing perceptions about addiction and employment across the industry. Sarah and Tom became regular volunteers at Bridgehaven, with Tom offering financial counseling to families rebuilding their lives. The center's family dinner program, inspired by their own reconciliation journey, became a model for other recovery centers. Marcus's relationship with his children deepened in unexpected ways. Jason's medical practice began specializing in addiction medicine, combining his father's experiential wisdom with his own clinical expertise. Emma's college research focused on intergenerational trauma and healing, her papers citing Bridgehaven's family restoration programs. But perhaps the most profound transformation was captured in Marcus's final entry in his original recovery journal. 2 years ago, I stood outside Mount Sinai Hospital, a broken man with nothing left to lose. Today I stand on the rooftop of Bridgehaven, watching the sunset with my family, surrounded by others walking the path of recovery. God didn't just heal my addiction, He transformed it into a testimony. Every scar became a story of hope, every failure a foundation for ministry, every lost year a lesson in His redemptive power. This isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of countless others. For with God, our deepest wounds become our greatest purpose, and our darkest moments light the way for others to find their path home. 5 years later, Marcus celebrated his daughter Emma's wedding in the Bridgehaven rooftop garden, now expanded into a healing space that served hundreds of families. As he watched Emma dance with her new husband, surrounded by recovered addicts and their families, his grandson toddling between guests, Marcus noticed a young man entering timidly through the garden gate, another soul seeking hope. With a gentle smile, he excused himself from the celebration. Some callings don't take holidays, and every new story deserves its own beginning. If you're struggling with addiction, questioning your faith, or wondering if God can use you, know that He can transform any life, any workplace, any situation. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope. Have your own story of transformation? Share it in the comments below. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.